This week, we finally see some positive movement in the astrology with Jupiter stationing direct, but that's not our only highlight that we see this week. We have Mercury making a trine to Jupiter before Jupiter stations direct. We have Venus ingressing into Aries. We have the Mercury Cazimi going on, and we have Mars retrograde still make its trine to Saturn. And so one thing to say about this week is that every single planet will be debilitated in some way. It'll be in either its sign of detriment or its sign of fall. And in the astrology, that just means that the planet doesn't have access to the resources that it needs to do the job that it has to do. But in my opinion, with Jupiter stationing direct, it's going to feel as if things are finally moving forward because that's at least one major positive transit. And from here on out, from the rest of the month, we're only going to be seeing more and more positive transits go on. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for February 3rd through February 9th of 2025. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer. I like to tell you guys what's going on in the astrology and how to use it to your advantage. With that being said, this week, like I said in the intro, we have quite every single planet's going to be debilitated. There's not a lot of dignity going on this week. However, I think the two small changes that we see on Tuesday have a bigger impact than you might even anticipate. So as we go into Monday, we have the moon in Aries making a square to Mars, our first highlight, which is Mercury making a trine to Jupiter. And then the moon will ingress into Taurus later on in the evening. I'm really looking forward to, I think, just starting this week off with the Mercury-Jupiter trine, because while the moon is in Aries making a square to Mars in Cancer, there's going to feel like there's this impatient, pushing, wanting to just go faster than maybe you should feeling, because the moon is in Aries, right? The moon is about our emotions, our body. It's in Aries. We want to move fast, go, 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 but it's squaring Mars in Cancer. Now, Mars is in the sign of the moon, and the moon is in the sign of Mars, and they're making a square to one another, and Mars is just retrograding Cancer. There's this feeling of not wanting to get up. Do you remember being a kid and not wanting to go to school, and your parents were like, come on, you need to wake up to get to school, and you couldn't specify a specific reason why you didn't want to go to school, but you just didn't want to go, and so you've fake slept in, or you fake being sick. That's kind of the vibe on Monday. There's going to be this feeling of needing to push things really intensely, like your parents trying to wake you up to go to school, but you're going to resist that. And so I think the key on Monday is just to kind of understand if you're not feeling hyped up, if you're not feeling energized or ready to go, and you're feeling a lot of resistance, that's probably why, and just work with it, right? Be aware of it. But we do have Mercury making a trine to Jupiter. And here's the thing I've been thinking about with this. Some of the things that I wrote down, it's Mercury is about the way that we communicate, our ideas, logical, rational thought. Jupiter is about faith and belief, and they're making a trine, right? So our ideas and the way that we're thinking is very inspiring and giving us hope. But Mercury is in Aquarius and Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, where the thing I kind of wrote down was just there's a lot of mental gymnastics that you're going to have to go through in order to have that feeling. What's very funny to me about both manifestation and magic is all magic is if you light this candle and say these words and put these rocks in a certain position, then this event will happen. And the movement of all of this stuff is just your subconscious making, associating an action to a thing. And you don't always really need to do that, right? And I feel like a lot of magic is just a lot of mental gymnastics to essentially do manifestation. You don't really need to do all these tiny things. They can be very impactful, but you don't need them. They're just a tool. It's just a way to make it real. But with Mercury trining Jupiter, there is this very positive mental feeling that we have, and I think it's very hopeful, but I think it might be almost exhausting to get there, which is fine, right? Whatever way it's going to take for you to get where you need to go. So I really like Mercury trining Jupiter. I like this for communication. I like this for feeling a sense of optimism, especially because Jupiter's about to station direct. So now that Mercury's in Aquarius, and we're kind of thinking of all these different ways of all right, the way I like to think of Mercury in Aquarius is in a time before 2020, when Pluto wasn't in Aquarius and there wasn't the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, science and studies used to mean something and be kind of cool. And it would be very interesting to share data and share versus now, when people are oh, that's unscientific, or the data or the sources say it's you have to understand, people are very burnt out on that kind of good stuff. And I feel like Mercury in Aquarius gets us a little bit our mind working on okay, well, what is the most systematic way of thinking of something like this? Mercury in Capricorn is much more pragmatic, much more stick to the plan, versus Mercury in Aquarius is willing to look at data, willing to look at, different situations in order to, again, make things kind of more streamlined, or at least make things make more sense. And as it trines Jupiter, this is Mercury kind of again, doing its mental gymnastics. Then it's oh, because of these mental gymnastics, I now see the bigger picture. I now see how I can have hope. I now see what the solution is. And this is great because tomorrow, the next day on Tuesday, Jupiter stations direct. And we'll talk about that then. But the moon also ingresses into Taurus later on Monday, which is just essentially feeling a little bit more grounded. And I think that's something to look forward to. Now we get to Tuesday, and Tuesday's probably the most exciting day of this week because we'll have the moon first go into Taurus. It's going to make a square to Pluto, and then it's going to make a square to Mercury. And then we have our two highlights, which is Jupiter stationing direct, and then Venus enters Aries. So first thing with the moon in Taurus making a square to Pluto and then squaring Mercury. The thing I wrote down was, quote, "The cheese and wine is bad for you." That's the vibe of the moon in Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius, where like you're having a good time, you're drinking wine, eating cheese, a charcuterie board, and someone's like, actually, data shows that and it's just like, shut up, nerd. Like, I'm going to drink my wine and have my cheese. That's the vibe. There's something about ideas or thought, or again, like Aquarius is very like, oh, well, this is what this group of people do, and this is what this does. It's like squaring the moon in Taurus. It's like, I'm just trying to vibe, like chill out. So there's that throughout the day, which is going to be a little, a thing to work through is probably the way I'd put it. But Jupiter stationing direct, the thing I wrote down is it's hard for me to not think of memes half the time, but I give it 5 big booms. If you know what that is, then you know. If you don't, you don't. Jupiter stationing direct, you have to think Jupiter's been retrograde since October. And Jupiter, when it's retrograde, is like, if you want any of the good luck, if you want any of the fortune or the abundance, number one, it takes a lot longer. Number two, it's like more internalized and not so much external. Jupiter stationing direct is like, okay, hope, abundance, like all of the fun Jupiter stuff is now externalized, and you'll just like see it in your day-to-day world. Jupiter stationing direct is belief and faith and hope is finally moving forward. It's finally wanting to move forward rather than like retrogress. Like the way I would interpret it from a more literal point of view too is like Jupiter moving forward is like, oh, we have hope and faith. Jupiter going retrograde is like, oh, we don't have that hope and faith. And so that's a really important thing to recognize. And there's so many clients I've had and people I've talked to that just like January and February sucks. Like February, I think things get a lot better, but January's been pretty low. Like there's not really been all that good of astrology. Like sure, Venus is in, Pisces right now, but this Jupiter stationing direct to me is not so much, oh, Jupiter stations direct and that's Jupiter. It's like, oh, now that Jupiter's direct, Mars is getting ready to station direct here soon. I feel like there's this feeling of things finally moving forward with Jupiter stationing direct. And now we have Venus moving into Aries. Now, maybe it's because I'm biased because I have all fire and air in my chart, so I'm not the biggest water sign fan. But with Venus moving into Aries, the reason I'm excited for this is the two things I wrote down were like, be a baddie. Now, what do I mean by baddie? Like baddie is like an energy, right? Like it's almost like a trope in like movies where it's like you have like nerdy girl who's supposed to be like insecure and self-conscious, and then like they take off her glasses and then like she's like a baddie, and then like there's like this energy and everyone's like, who's that girl? Like that's kind of like the Venus and Aries thing in my opinion. The other thing I wrote down is like take the cookie. A lot of Venus and Aries reminds me of like doing something you're not supposed to do, but it's fun. Like Venus is about pleasure and fun and connection, but she's an Aries, right? Aries is like the sign of like it reminds me of like play fighting. Well, the reason I wrote down take the cookie is like you're not supposed to have the cookie. Cookie stays in the cookie jar. You're not allowed to have it, but like there's something fun about breaking that rule and getting that sweet treat, right? Like there's like no harm, no foul kind of a thing. And the reason I'm excited for this too is yes, when Venus goes into Aries, we're going to have right now the sun is in Aquarius. The sun is in detriment. Venus is going to be in detriment in Aries. Mars is fallen in Cancer. Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. Like most of the planets don't have any dignity. And so there's this like lack of things being available. And the reason I like that is like a lot of my chart is very fallen and in detriment. And what I've learned is when you don't have access to the resources that you need or the tools that you need to do the job that you need to do, you get creative. And that's what I like about a lot of this dignity and debility stuff is like, hey, you got something to do and you don't have any tools or resources to do it. Figure it out anyway. And in my opinion, Venus going into Aries is now starting to dip its toe back into the fire sign stuff. And regardless of where your placements are, like fire sign is going to, again, like fire literally moves up into the air. Like it's literally a positive forward movement feeling. And I think as we get more and more fire stuff going, we're kind of thawing ourselves out after the winter. And so I'm looking forward to Venus in Aries. As Venus goes into Aries, it's less like chill and all over the place and much more like, again, like it just reminds me of the movie trope where it's like nerdy girl takes off glasses. All of a sudden she's like hot and sexy. Where can you put that into your own life? And again, that doesn't just mean like your looks. It can be that. But like, what about within your work? What about within like your friends? Like rather than being like really insecure or weird or shy, being like, you know what? Let's just like have more fun with it. Let's be a little bit more adventurous. And here's the other thing too to start thinking about. Venus is in shadow now. as Venus goes into Aries, she's going to be retrograding here. So you're going to be experiencing this Venus and Aries stuff in one way, and you're going to change your relationship to it. Like Venus retrogrades are just like reevaluations. If Venus is like literally value, Venus going retrograde is like, whoa, do I value this? Do I not value this? What do I actually want out of this? And so again, something to really think about is what was going on for you in spring of 2017, what was going on for you in spring of 2009 and spring of 2001. Those were the last 3 times Venus retrograded in Aries. And so you can think about those times and what has come up for you those last few times, depending on where Aries is at in your chart and all that kind of good stuff. But in my opinion, Venus's evening star, you're going to be like trying this thing, doing this Venus and Aries thing and realizing, oh, I like the Venus and Aries thing, but I need to do it differently. And so that's going to be something that we talk about in the Venus retrograde part of it. But for right now, it's just Venus and Aries. We're not doing the Pisces thing where it's like soft and all over the place. It's like a little bit more fierce, a little bit more in your face. So then we get to Wednesday, and on Wednesday, the moon, while it's still in Taurus, is going to make a sextile to Saturn and then Mars. And then we have the moon conjoining Uranus. Wednesday's not all that crazy, but what's nice is like on Tuesday, it might be hard to do things because the moon is in Taurus and it's squaring Mercury in Aquarius, where it's just like, oh, you want to like, have you ever like, this is what I hate about learning stuff is like, when I learned that receipts have more phthalates and like BPAs more than anything, and it's like you don't want to touch the receipt, but then you got to fucking touch the receipt at some point. So that's what the moon in Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius reminds me of. It's like it's easy to get worried about everything, but at a certain point you got to just deal with it. On Wednesday, when the moon makes an application from a sextile to Saturn and Mars, there's like this just being able to like go with the flow, if that makes sense. Like the moon in Taurus is more grounded, more stable, more fixated. It's not doing this and doing that. But as the moon is in Taurus sextiling Saturn, it's like you could focus on one thing. You can do that one thing, feel like you're in your groove with it. And then as it sextiles Mars as well, these things that you're having to do are not necessarily like tasks. They're not these things that you check off on a list. They're more so of like, hey, this is something that is more of a necessity and that I have to do and that I have to get a little bit like comfortable. If you've ever done anything like when I was shooting music videos for, some of my music, it's like an all day adventure, if that makes sense. Like that's the one thing you're focusing on for that day. And that's what this reminds me of. Now, by the end of it on Wednesday, the moon conjoins Uranus, where there is some sort of disruption. There is some sort of shock. The big thing here is that like, with the moon and Taurus, while we want these, while we want to be grounded, while we want to be, comfortable, Uranus is just not always going to kind of bring that, if that makes sense. So you can flow with it. You cannot, don't get too comfortable because, there might be an earthquake kind of a thing. But yeah, it's just Wednesday is like, you'll get some stuff done. You'll be focused. And then by the end of the day, there's some sort of distraction or some sort of disruption. And that's just that. And then we get into Thursday. And on Thursday, the moon is going to ingress into Gemini. It's going to make a sextile to Venus. It's going to trine Pluto. Great. Then the moon will conjoin Jupiter. And our highlight for Thursday is that we have the North Node conjoining Neptune. So there's a lot to talk about here. Number one, I'm loving Thursday. Moon goes into Gemini. It's going to sextile Venus and then conjoin Pluto. So it's in between two benefics, right? So this is like Venus in Aries, moon in Gemini is like just witty. Like if you're like chatted with someone and they're just like, they're flirtatious in a very witty way, in a very quick way where it's just like, mentally, I don't know, like what's the stupid term? I'm tired of all these sexual terms. Like, what is it? Demisexual? It's not demisexual. That you're like attracted to like things being, people being smart or whatever. So with the moon making that sextile to Venus, it's like there's this witty, fun, playful energy. And then the moon is just going to be applying to Jupiter for the rest of the day. So there's like this hopeful, very positive attitude for Thursday. However, we also have the North Node conjoining Neptune. And I've been, there's really a lot of directions to talk about this. It's one of those things where Neptune is a very outer planet. The North Node isn't necessarily a thing, if that makes sense. It's not a planet, right? It's technically a calculation. Why I kind of like hesitate saying anything about it is I wonder how much more the North Node Neptune thing will make more sense in hindsight. Because the literal read I would give you is like, well, the North Node is this very hyper pursuant, very hungry, like very driven thing, and it's on Neptune, which is like illusion, fantasy, mysticism, deception, idealism. And there's a part of me that's like, there are the things that we're heading towards, or the things that we're hungry for, is the delusion that's strong. And have you ever like done something and in the moment you were doing it, you didn't think it was that crazy, and you look back, you're like, damn, I was really like on a sick one then. I just wonder how much that is right now, because maybe it just doesn't feel like it. But the North Node on top of Neptune really hits on Thursday, and I just wonder how much. And again, it doesn't seem like an exact thing. I I like, because the North Node kind of has been with Neptune for like this whole week, but the exact conjunction technically happens. Well, the exact with I think I'm using the true node. I don't use the mean node because the mean node is just that's a whole other conversation to go into. But things I wrote down are like max delusion, and I just wonder if is this a good thing for the right people or a bad thing for certain people? Does that make sense? Like some of you are delusional about things that you absolutely need to stop being delusional about, and other people could really use that sense of like delusion to get out of their way, to get out of their own way, to move into an area that they want to. And so Thursday has a lot of positive aspects to it. I think it's very fun. I think it's very playful. And I would argue it's a great day to tap into the part of yourself that wants more, that wants to achieve more, that has something to live for. And you don't need, it doesn't need to make sense. You don't need to have a plan. You just need to have to like really just believe in it. And that's not saying, oh, you should believe in it and then not do anything. You need to believe it and then do it. You need to earn it. But for so many people, they never take action because they never believe. But if they believed, it'd be easier to take the action. So it's like this vicious circle. So the North Node conjoining Neptune is I think a really good day for like manifesting. Visualization is really important, and just being hungry for it. So I like that. We get to Friday, and our highlight is Venus makes a sextile to Pluto, and then the Moon, while it's still in Gemini, is going to make a trine to Mercury and square Saturn. Venus sextiling Pluto not that big of a deal to me, just because it's like, okay, like what's going on here? Venus will be sextiling Pluto throughout her retrograde. The thing I would look at though is a sextile is going to be an underhanded sort of support. Like a trine is very like what's the word I'd look at? It almost reminds me of like a trine is like if you have a band on stage, the trine is going to be like there's a bassist, there's a drummer, there's a guitarist, right? A sextile is kind of like there's no bassist, but the backing track of the bassist is there, even though there's no live bassist. Like it's there, it's support, it's not the biggest thing. But Venus making a sextile to Pluto just seems like the ability to be like on a baddie type level is more apparent or more accessible. That feeling is more accessible because there are people that can, the word that I keep wanting to use is like gaslight you into it. But I think the other thing too is it's like, have you ever gone out of your way to do something uncomfortable and different, but it's something that you want to do, and then like you didn't, and everyone's like, wow, you should have done that a long time ago. Like, good for you. That's kind of the idea here, is that feeling. So I really like that for Friday. But as the Moon trines Mercury, I think this is having a lot of ideas and thinking about all these ways to, go whatever it is that you have to go for, do whatever it is that you have to do. But as the Moon makes this square to Saturn, there's like this internal resistance. Like it's really easy for things to think about things, but then actually taking the action to do them is the hard part. And that Moon squaring Saturn just feels like on a logical level, it makes sense to do, but on a physical level, there's some sort of resistance. On a spiritual internal level, there's a resistance to these ideas. And I think that's what I think Friday is a really good opportunity to like look at, like, what are you resisting? Why are you resisting these ideas? Like go a little bit a layer deeper, not necessarily like, oh, I'm resisting it because X, Y, and Z, but like there's some internal thing that you're resisting to all these new ideas and the way that things are being told to you. What is it? And then we get to Saturday. The Moon will be in Gemini, and it's going to square Neptune pretty early in the morning. And then it moves into Cancer, and it squares Venus. I don't really like Saturday. I don't really like this day. Because like the Moon is in Gemini squaring Neptune. We're just, again, feeling overwhelmed, feeling confused. That's just going to be the vibe. But then it goes into Cancer, and the Moon's in Cancer, right? It's about being being protective. And it's technically with Mars, even though it's not conjoining Mars yet. But before it conjoins Mars, it's going to make this square to Venus, where it's just kind of like being a bitch. And what I mean by that is just kind of like, it reminds me of like kind of like the baddie energy sort of a thing. It's like, that's like, crying is not hot. Crying is not sexy. And I'm saying that in a facetious kind of like tongue-in-cheek way, not necessarily like, oh, it's not in general, because I get it. There's times for that. But the Moon in Cancer squaring Venus in Aries is like, it's not about being tender, and the tenderness and the protection part of it and the feeling and the emotion part of it is getting in the way of trying to do the fun thing. And maybe the fun thing isn't fun. I don't know. It's just, there's something about Saturday where the Moon squaring Venus is, yes, the Moon is contacting Venus, so there is something fun to it, but there's like this, like, what our needs aren't being fulfilled by the actions that we're taking or the things that we want, right? Like the things that we want aren't actually fulfilling the needs that we have. And then we get to Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. Mercury Cazimi is the first highlight. The second highlight is we'll have Mars make its trine to Saturn, its second trine to Saturn. And then the Moon, while it's in Cancer, will trine Saturn and conjoin Mars and sextile Uranus. I made two predictions about the Super Bowl. The one was when I looked up what time does the Super. By the way, I'm so, you know why I'm fucking sick of AI? And I had a lot of people be like, oh, the AI, Cameron's opinion about AI is weird. I talked about creativity in a creative way. Like people are literally using AI to be like, to literally use the creative part of their brain. And I think that's dumb. It's like using crutches when both of your fucking legs work just fine. Or using a wheelchair. But when I Googled, what time does the Super Bowl start? Google's AI was like 1:30 and it doesn't. And it's just like, why? This is Google's worth how much fucking money and they can't even tell me what time the Super Bowl starts at an accurate way, and it's the first thing that shows up. Anyway, if the game started at 1:30, I thought Eagles were going to win, but if the game starts at 5:30, it's like Leo rising, the ascendant rulers and detriment, and like Chiefs are probably going to win, and we all fucking know it. And it's so funny. I saw a tweet. Sorry, I got to rant on this. I saw a tweet that was like, I apologize to all Patriots fans. We were too harsh on you. The Chiefs kingdom, the Chiefs tyranny is way worse. And I was a Patriots fan since like I was a kid. And just like people hated on the Patriots. When I was a kid, I went to a playoff game. It was Chargers versus Patriots in like, I don't know, 2006 or something like that. And literally adult grown men threw beer at me because I was wearing a Patriots jersey in fucking Chargers territory. The Chargers fucking suck. But it was very nice. I'm like, dude, fuck the Chiefs. I don't even watch football anymore, but I'm sure you're a Chiefs fan. I'm sure you'll be fine, and Taylor Swift will end the Super Bowl, and we'll all live happily ever after. But that's probably what's going to happen. But we have the Mercury Cazimi, Mars retrograde trining Saturn. The thing with the Mercury Cazimi is if you're not watching football, great. But there's something about Sunday where a light bulb kind of comes up, especially after the Mercury retrograde that we just had in Sagittarius and how we're about to go into another one in like Aries and in Pisces. This Sunday is a really good day to just kind of like clear out your schedule, get quiet, and ask yourself what's next. Like, have you ever just been like so mentally all over the place that you just haven't had the time to like sit down and be like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we got to do. That's what Sunday's for. That's for the Mercury Cazimi. You're going to get some sort of a letter or some sort of a text or a phone call, and there's going to be some sort of line of communication that comes in that's very like illuminating. But we'll also have Mars retrograde trining Saturn. This is really interesting to me because like a lot of like what I talked about on the game plan video and my monthly rising sign horoscopes, which are over on my website, is you will be supported in an area that is really crappy, if that makes sense. Like you are having to do something that you don't want to do, but you will be supported going through it. Because Mars retrograde, like a lot of the Mars retrograde in Cancer is like you just got to let fires burn for a while. Like there's nothing that you can do to fix it or change it. But as that's happening, Mars trining Saturn is like the support in order to like let that happen, like have a contained fire is available. And I think Mars trining Saturn is, again, I would typically love a Mars trining Saturn, but the fact that it's retrograde is like, because if Mars is trining Saturn and Mars is direct, it's like, hey, the actions that you're taking and the things that you're doing are like really benefiting like your sense of discipline and your sense of like authority and your sense of commitment. Like it's all groovy. But as Mars is retrograde trining Saturn, it's very like, okay, what do you need to do? What do you have to protect? What do you have to take care of that maybe you don't have the energy for, but like it's your responsibility. Does that make sense? And so we'll also have the moon make a trine to Saturn and conjoin Mars. And so there's something about Sunday that seems kind of painful, to be honest with you. And in a way that's not like just tragically bad, but more so of like, okay, you have to do this thing and it sucks, but you've got to do it and you're going to be supported through it. It's not going to feel good, but it's the thing that you need to do and you got to do it. That's what Sunday's for. And that's this week, guys. Next week, we'll have Mercury make a square to Uranus. We're going to have the full moon in Leo. This full moon in Leo is going to come in so clutch. And then we'll have Mercury ingress into Pisces, and that's a whole other subject. So with that being said, make sure you like this video. If you like it, comment below. Let me know what you're looking forward to, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss a video, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.